Okay, well, Happy New Year and welcome to the webinar entitled Making Land Ownership a Reality, Reflections from the Journey of the Working Group for Women in Land Ownership. I'm Karen Kaiser and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Before we get started, I want to just cover a few housekeeping items. Since this is a webinar, your audio will be on mute during the hour. And if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, use the chat function at the bottom of your screen. For any logistical issues, send a message to Taylor Dorsey, who's the co-host, using the chat function, again, at the bottom of your screen. And please, as you enter the login to the webinar, enter your name in the chat box and your affiliation. This webinar will be recorded. I don't know, I guess recording has started. I'm going to just start with introducing you to the topic for today's series. So this is the fourth webinar in the series on gender equity, mobility, sustainability, and initiatives from the Global South. The 6 webinars feature professionals leading innovative programs that focus on poverty, women's rights, environmental justice, and socioeconomic development in South Asia. They each focus on the UN's Sustainable Development Goal number 5 to, quote, achieve gender equality and empower all women. Despite our efforts to educate and economically empower marginalized women in the Global South, there's still extensive work to be done. The series is being co-sponsored by the U.S. nonprofit Friends of Kalungarai and Adelphi University. Friends of Kalungarai supports the community-based programs of Kalungarai, which is an NGO that serves widowed or abandoned women in South India. Their programs are community-based programs and include microcredit loans, self-help groups, and leadership training, among other things. I will now turn the virtual mic over to Dr. Gokul Mandayam, who will introduce today's speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Kaiser. Good morning, everybody. Happy New Year again. And it is indeed my pleasure and honor to introduce my classmate who I went to graduate social work school with in India, Ms. Shilpa Vasavada, who is a trained social scientist from TISS Mumbai and has remained associated with the rural development sector since graduation from her MSW program. Her area of work has been social dimensions of livelihood, specifically gender mainstreaming and community mobilization. For 10 years, she was associated with a non-governmental organization called Aga Khan Rural Support Program in the western part of India. And since then, she's been working also as an independent development professional, largely looking at gender mainstreaming in natural resource-based livelihood. Ms. Shilpa is also a founder, member, and convener of a network of more than 40 nonprofit organizations that works on rural gender mainstreaming and resource-based livelihood issues. And she also has had a lot of training opportunities to work on this gender mainstreaming and livelihood issues. As an independent development professional, she has worked with different varieties of stakeholders from government, non-government, and donor organizations, and has always, kept it open to learn new skills and has played an immense role in gender empowerment. Today, Shilpa will be talking about the what, why, and how of women's agricultural land ownership issue. She will articulate what this entails and how it is a dream for countless rural women in India with regard to land ownership. The why will be explored, emphasizing the profound significance of land ownership for women farmers in rural areas. Drawing from reflections on the journey of the collective of civil society organizations known as WGWLO, that she also was instrumental in being a founder of. Shilpa will illustrate the how by reflecting on WGWLO's endeavors to secure and promote land ownership for rural women. So without further ado, Shilpa, please take it away. Thank you. Go ahead, Shilpa, when you're ready.
सॉरी पीछे वाली लाइट बंद कर दो हाँ लाइट बंद कर
You are muted.
Thank you so much, Gokul, for this introduction, and a pleasure to be introduced by this classmate. Equally a pleasure to be here in this forum, to share my experiences, to share the journey, to share the learning and the insights. I would like to share the screen as we move on, and I hope my screen is visible. Yeah.
Looks good. We can see it.
Sure. Thank you. So, land of one's own, from dream to reality, and yet a dream, I would add that way. So let me start with, I just want to start with 3 small stories, to set the context of what are we referring to. So I want to talk about Ladu Ben, who is a single woman, lost her husband. She had only one daughter and she had no son. She wanted to get land in her name on the land records. In-laws refused. When she insisted, they insisted that she should adopt a son. She was willing to adopt a son, but they insisted that the son should be of the brother-in-law, which she did later on. And then she asked for her share of land. In-laws insisted that the land would go straight in the adopted son's name rather than her name. When she insisted further, the in-laws joined hands with the village revenue official and made sure that she did not get her right, and she gave the adopted son back. This is one story of Ladu Ben. Sharmila Ben comes from a tribal background, only daughter of the parents, and she cultivated the parents' land. But after the parents died, the uncle and the cousin brother, they eyed on the land, and she called a special village council panchayats meeting, Gram Sabha, as we call it in India. And the village council head, the sarpanch, said that in our society, daughters don't claim for land. That's the second story. And the third story I want to talk about is Teji Ben from Ahmedabad district, which is it is getting industrialized very fast. There are huge land mafias, and Teji Ben's husband sold off the land to some land agent without even Teji Ben knowing about the same. Her main source of livelihood gone. So these are 3 different stories, but have the same common thread. It shows that while the law gives rights to, so in India, law gives rights for land ownership to widows and to daughters. But in practice, there are social barriers which they face. Land grabbing and land acquisition happens on a large scale, and women are not even aware. As a wife, and there is a huge belt from Ahmedabad till Kutch in Gujarat, I'm referring to, which is the western side of India, where land is being sold off and women don't even come to know. Land legal literacy is very minimal among women in general. We also saw that in the case of Laduben, in the case of Tejiben, the administration, the village revenue official or the block revenue official, they also played an active role. And so they also are sort of colored with patriarchal lenses, and so are the village councils, the panchayats. So, but the stories also reflect, all the three stories, that even if women do not have land in their name, they do struggle to have land in their own name. Currently, right now, there is no mechanism in the government setup. There are several centers which the government has set up for women's support, but they largely support for domestic violence, for other schemes, but there is no mechanism which guides them on revenue matters, revenue-based legal matters. So right now there's a vacuum on that. Revenue officials could play a key role. They're supposed to be playing a key role, but because they are also part of the patriarchal system, they get influenced and try to sort of demotivate women in their own way. So the stories also reflect that it's not one or two stakeholders that we need to work with, but it's a range of multi-stakeholders. This is the background in which the issue of land ownership is sort of located. In India, this though I'm talking about a state of Western India, this applies to across the country. Before I move on, let's just pause for a few minutes and quickly refer to. So we normally talk about women's land rights. So land rights has three aspects. When we refer to land rights, it has use of land, which can be done by anybody. It has control over land, control as in decision making, who decides. And so control actually is for decision making. But there's third, which is ownership. And normally the debate is that if you have control, then ownership doesn't matter. But land actually is something which certainly control is important, but ownership also matters significantly, because unless you have your name in the land records, nobody can sort of claim. And there are so many frauds happening that even if you control at the household level, there are larger factors and larger players which sort of can take you for a ride. And so if you don't have ownership in the records. So these are the three different levels. I'm right now referring to ownership. And I'll, as I said, ownership is very, very important when we talk about agriculture land. So why do we need to talk about it? I'll just take a minute or two on that, though I will not go into details. So there are different types of arguments. So if you look at it from a welfare perspective, and in social work, we have different, so you have welfare argument, you have efficiency argument. So from a welfare perspective, you have land is the major source of the main source of livelihood. And this is very, very important for all female-hearted households. And especially for the single women, it's a major source of security against poverty, even social security for that matter. So for single women, this is the most important source for livelihood and social security. For married women, land ownership, having land in the name, is also a safety net against domestic violence. So there have been studies in Kerala where there is a community which has land in women's name. So there have been studies where if land is there in their name, the domestic violence is in fact significantly lower. I think it is 49% versus 7% or something. So Pradeep Panda and Dr. Beena Agarwal, I think that was a study in 2003. Yeah, 49% and 18%, sorry, not 8%. And the study says that land ownership gives them a fallback mechanism and an exit option for women if they face domestic violence. So that is the welfare argument for single women and the married women. But there's also the efficiency argument where where in India, there are different types of data available, but largely women are tillers and agriculture workers. 70 to 80% of agriculture work is being done by women. 65% of women, as against 44% of men, depend on agriculture. There's also data of the Niti Aayog, which says that 80% of economically active women are engaged in agriculture. So while such a huge proportion of women are involved in agriculture, obviously, in order to make agriculture efficient, they will require to have access to resources. And all our entitlements, whether it is access to credit, whether it is access to irrigation, whether it is access to membership in decision-making bodies, everything is based on land ownership. So women who are into agriculture, but because they do not have land in their name, they cannot access formal source of credit from banks. They cannot have subsidized inputs. They cannot have membership in decision-making bodies like irrigations cooperative societies or primary agriculture cooperative societies. So they are not in the if they're not in the membership, obviously they can't even take decisions. So they are completely away from the entire agriculture ecosystem when they do not have land. So this is the second argument that we are having. And the third, of course, is the equality, social justice, rights argument, that it's her right and we don't need to justify, it's women's right to own land. And it's, of course, a determinant of social status, political power. It increases self-esteem. I've heard women saying that, land is in my name. I only will decide what to grow on that, or my in-laws better not say anything to me, wheat comes from my field. And the power, the pride that they take, in saying that, it shows the bargaining power that they hold, the self-esteem that they have. So that's the third and the basic argument why land rights, land ownership is important. And that's why the dream matters. For Tejiben, for Sharmilaben, and for Laduben, and for millions of women like that. This is as I said, this is the background in which our network started. This is a network of 37 non-government organizations and community-based organizations in the state of Gujarat, the Western India. All of them are grassroots organizations except one. And it started as a sharing learning forum, and later on evolved also into working at the policy level. Works in 17 districts of Gujarat. And the brown part also shows how we have reached out to other states to share our experiences and learning in different ways. How we started is very interesting, and because it's a effort of university, I thought I should share here. So our seeds were sown by a book, a scholarly book, which you might have read, called A Land of One's Own. Padma Shri Dr. Beena Agarwal, she's written a book, Land of One's Own. And one of the organization's CEO had read the book. He was fascinated by the same. And she used to go to that organization for some research. And he invited her to talk about the issue. And she readily, surprisingly and pleasantly surprisingly, but readily agreed to come down. And then that was converted into a state level workshop of NGOs. And at the end of the workshop, NGOs realized 2-3 things. One, that this is a very, very important issue, which for some reason we've not focused upon. In the workshop, there were women's-based organizations, there were legal organizations, and there were livelihood-based organizations. All of them were working for years in this area. But all of them felt that they had not focused on this issue. They had not understood the issue from this angle when Dr. Beena Agarwal took it up in her workshop. And that's why they decided to come together. So one of the key aspects that I want to highlight is that it's not always that the grassroots organizations are aware about the issues. A lot of times we are all oblivion to the, this obvious, this is something which is like, it happens on day-to-day basis, and it takes some certain books like this to really open our eyes. And that's where the seeds were sown for collective functioning. We decided to come together for 3 years, and it's now 23 years that we've been working together. Um, we also understood from the workshop that there are different ways in which women can own land. And now I'm focusing on ownership of land. So they can own it through inheritance of private agricultural land. They can own it through market by purchasing land, or they could own it through redistribution by the government. Government gives it to the landless people or to forest dwellers, etc. And that by law, government gives it in joint names. Um, Now in India, in order to purchase land for by women, women require money, and that is difficult for poor women. Redistribution of land has very limited scope, whereas 86% of India's agriculture land is privately owned. So we realized at the end of the workshop that there is a huge scope and need to work at the inheritance level, inheritance of private land, which normally people don't question about. When we talk about women's land rights, we talk about redistribution by the government, but we don't talk about inheritance which is given in the society, because this is something which, land is the most productive resource at the village, at the rural level, and the patriarchal equations are at the peak, which we don't want to question. So we decided that we will work on inheritance rights to land, which was itself a very challenging but also very sensitive issue. We knew that. And that's where we decided that let's give it a try for 3 years, working collectively for 3 years. If we can't manage to crack that nut, then we will sort of wind up the network. What happened is a history, and I'll share that over here. So, so when we started, as I said, it was a sensitive, challenging issue. But in the workshop, only 1 or 2 persons from the organizations had come and they committed. There was a lack of organizational mandate, because when they went back and they shared that they wanted to work on this issue, others in the organizations refused, that it will bounce back from the rural areas. Our organization will be asked to leave the society, leave the community, and it will be difficult to even stay there. That's where we started with initial 1 or 2 years. We spent a lot of time building a mandate within the organizations and building capacity of the staff itself. How do we go about? And we started with a small study. Each organization which was associated with this network, in the beginning there were 13 NGOs, and we started with a study over there, where we realized a lot of things, and we realized, so we took up perceptions of different stakeholders. What do women think about land ownership of women? What do men think about it? What do village leaders men think about it? What do village revenue officials, block revenue officials, panchayat leaders, different perceptions around that? Where are the barriers? Is there any opportunity? We looked at all that, and it helped us to cull out strategies. But it also helped us to realize that what we had assumed was not the right thing. We had assumed 1 or 2 things. We had assumed that all women wanted the land, and that all men were against it. So it sort of questioned that assumption, because we found men who had consciously transferred land in their wife or their daughter's names. We also found most of the women being socialized to the same patriarchal setup and saying that we don't require land. Whereas actually, so that was on the face of it. The moment we'll dig deeper into it, they'll say, of course, and that is where the dream came. For them, that time, it sounded like a dream. हो तो बहुत अच्छा है, लेकिन क्या हो सकता है क्या हमारे नाम पे? So if we have land, of course, it is very good. But can we have land in our name? So that was the beginning. So that's where we realized that we need to create awareness among women and also sensitize men, and both were needed but also possible. We also realized in the initial few years that we had taken women. I mean, we of course talk about intersectionality of women, etc., etc. But we realized that we take women in as one identity, whereas actually when you look at it from the lenses of land ownership, different types of women, different marital status, different age, different socio-cultural status, all of them had different ways of denial, mechanisms of denial of rights. The way the married women were denied of their rights were very different than the ways that a widow woman would be denied of their rights. If we understand that, then the strategies would differ as well. So we realized that we needed to go deeper. Tribal women had very different issues than caste-based societies, women from caste-based society. So we really needed to go deeper and to understand the issues, but then cull out strategies accordingly. Um, okay. Uh, so now I'm generalizing. Over a period of time, we've come up with a set of strategies which I'm going to sort of elaborate upon. There are multiple stakeholders. As I said, there are rural women, there are rural men, there are panchayat representatives. We saw that in the case of Sharmila Ben. Then there are village revenue officials. But there are also block, now that we have digitization, lot of power which used to be earlier with the village revenue official has now moved to the block level. So block revenue officials also have good amount of authority, and the district revenue officials come in the picture when it comes to cases of conflict. So the deputy collector is in charge of that. So, so we lay down the list, and for each category, we have evolved over a period of time. It didn't come up overnight. In fact, when we started to work on this issue, we looked around in the country, and barring one organization, we did not find any organization working on private agriculture land inheritance rights for women on a scale, or even for that matter, on a lower scale. So fine. So we started with awareness campaigns with women. As I said, we realized that we needed to make women aware about it. And let me share that when we started, we divided our full state, into two regions, two zones. And we held awareness get to we call it sammelan. So those on a regional level. And the idea was that, very honestly, we were very nervous, we were very scared how men would take it. So we were not willing to go, not at the village level, but even at the block level. So our initial two campaigns were get-togethers were at the regional level. We got a little more confident, and in the fourth or fifth year, we got at the district level. Eventually, we came to the block level. Now we are very comfortable to work at the village level. So every year we have village level campaigns targeting women and men with very clear messages. So these are some topics on which we have held some themes on which we've taken up campaigns. So one is creating awareness on inheritance rights to agriculture land for women, but also on joint ownership, joint ownership of agriculture land. Third was they need to understand the land records. So we took up the distribution of land records as an excuse and took up campaign for that. Fourth was to build identity of woman as a farmer and link it up with land records and land ownership. So there are several types of land. We took up once land acquisition and women's land ownership. So we take up different themes every year and design a campaign. And when we design a campaign, primarily we sort of come up with certain participatory tools. So there is a snake and ladder game which we used to play when we were children. We sort of changed that for women and land ownership. On the left corner, left lower corner, you can see there's a tool called tool of asset mapping. That's a very nice tool where women can see themselves that we use this red marks. Most of the red marks are under men. And then that's the starting point for discussion, that how is that so when we work so much in the agriculture fields, etc. And that triggers so there are triggering points that we look at from the participatory tools, which leads to certain type of, and it's self-realization. Instead of we talking in the rights language, it's basically the process of self-realization that we put focus on during the campaigns. So participatory tools have really helped us taken us a long way. And now, as I said, we are comfortable looking at, you can see there are village level meetings, pamphlets being distributed, wall paintings. There are vans which has mics in it. And so people now talk about that is the confidence we've got now after 10, 15 years, I would say, to take it up at the village level directly. Okay, so awareness camps, awareness campaigns, etc. That brought a lot of awareness, created a lot of awareness among women. Now that made a sort of, made us think in a different direction, because what happened was many women started coming up. When you create awareness, obviously there, as I said, there are, it's not that they don't want land in the name, it's just that they don't know where to go. So here is a way that we are talking about awareness. So they would come and approach somebody from the organization, NGO, and they'll say that in my family tree, my name has been removed, or in number 8A, this has been done. And for us, those were like, what are they talking about? What is family tree? And what is number 8A? And what is number 6? And we realized that we need to get into action. We can't simply stop by creating awareness. So eventually, we trained as a network, as a collective of NGOs or civil society organizations. We started paralegal training programs for the NGO staff on the land laws, land procedures, the revenue procedures. Over a period of time, we realized that NGOs are fine, but ultimately, Gujarat has several women's federations, SHGs and SHGs collectivized into federations. So, if we have somebody from the federation who gets trained, it would be even better. So, there are women paralegal workers who are like 6th literate or 8th literate, and they've been trained as paralegal workers for women and land rights by this network. Over 150, more than 150 paralegal workers have been trained, most of them women, most of them from the community. I think about 130 or plus from the community and women. And what they do are largely two types of roles. One is they take up social interventions, because several of this is not, it doesn't require directly legal intervention. A lot of them is lack of awareness and lack of understanding. So they go and discuss with the family how this is a legal right for a woman, and what will happen if they don't give the right. So they convince the family, and more than 75% of the cases, it takes time, but they get resolved at that level. But the second very important part that they play is helping the women to go through the legal procedures, to make applications, etc., etc. And now these paralegal workers from the community are also digitally literate. So they use tablets for awareness creation. So there are small video clippings which have been developed, but they also help them to prepare applications to access the government schemes, etc. You can see that in small groups, she's doing that. So paralegal workers have been the sort of pillar of these interventions. Third thing that we've done on a scale is to hold inheritance camps at the village level, where we involve the village revenue official, the patwari. But a lot of homework goes behind it, where the paralegal worker goes from house to house, identify cases where women are willing to put the claims. And see, individually, it's difficult, anybody to put the claim individually, it may bounce back from her own family and she has to live there forever, so they will not be willing to do so. In that case, what we've done is we've designed camps where in the public, it gives visibility, but it also gives the women strength of claiming the rights collectively. So it's not just me, but she's also claiming, and there's an environment, and the village revenue official is also accepting that. So this camps have been a very important a tool for us to take this up on a scale. Fourth, as I said earlier, again, over a period of time, we realized that, paralegal workers are associated with the women federations, but women federations have their own outreach. What happens to those women who are not a part of the federation? And there are, of course, many such women. And we realize that the block revenue official is the key person at the block level. So if we have some mechanism which is at the block level within the revenue setup, where they ensure the women's rights, women's land rights perspective, it will be really good. So there are what we call them as Swa Bhumi Kendra. Swa is self, Bhumi is land, Kendra is center. So center for land, legal land ownership for women. Here are these paralegal workers who have been trained by the network WGWLO. They they sit there twice a week, and 2 days or 3 days they go to the field in the villages. But when they sit there, they are catering to the needs of wider range of women, and sometimes even men come to them. Sometimes, meaning many a times they come to them. But then the condition is that unless there is a case which involves women, that case will not be taken up by these paralegal workers at the Swabhavi Kendra. So many of these Swabhavi Kendras are housed now with the dedicated work. The block revenue officials are also happy with that, and they have given the permission to set up the Kendra, to put up the tables in the block revenue officials office. So that is something which is a major change. Influencing men, we started little late, but has been our strategy now. Felicitation of men who have done a good job, meaning consciously transferring land to the wife or to daughter, but also designing campaigns just to convince men. So here is a picture, for example, of a participatory tool that we've designed for woman's identity as a farmer, where we've taken up different roles in agriculture, and there are two sort of corners where men do accept that women play such a big role in agriculture. And then again, the triggering question is, if they are playing such a big role, why don't we have land in their name, and why is it that their identity not as a farmer? And there'll be smile, there'll be discussions, and then, but very interestingly, huge impact. So many men have agreed, and they have actually transferred land or made it joint land in the with the wife. So sixth, of course, is panchayat, working with the panchayat, because it's a very, very important um, mechanism. They have constitutional power, but the sarpanch, the village council head, he or she verifies the entries. They have confidential report signed for the village revenue official, and several other things. So we collaborated with the State Institute of Rural Development, took up SATCOM, that satellite communication program. We took up campaigns with panchayats. We took up we collaborated with another network which worked with the elected women representatives, and worked with them to sensitize the elected representatives of the state. So, and took up this on Mahila Gram Sabhas, large campaign, and we really see that this is something which is going to be long lasting and very, very fruitful even in future. Um, Next stage came to, these are all fine at the village level, done by the paralegal workers and the Swabhumi Kendras. What about those who actually are the implementers of the law? Suppose the village revenue official, a woman goes to him or her, and he, for example, the village revenue official just makes one statement. Why have you come here? You don't have any man in your house? And her entire courage by which she has gone to the office will be gone. So we needed to sensitize this village revenue officials. So we worked with the state government, worked with them, convinced them that we wanted to conduct training programs for the village revenue officials. So we went to all the Panchayati Raj Talim Kendras. That's the Panchayati Raj training centers of the government of Gujarat, and trained about 3,200, more than 3,200 village revenue officials. So we have a pedagogy, we designed a training module for them, where we have debate, case studies, role plays, film screening, discussions, etc. You can see on the top, there's a debate going on, and the left bottom, there's an exercise, power exercise. So there are several ways in which we convince them. And we've seen a very good impact of these village revenue officials, at least in the villages where the NGOs are working from the network. There are a lot of behavioral changes and sensitization which we can see. So we conducted more than 90 training programs for them. We also started having structured dialogues with the block revenue official, because the block revenue officials, as I said, they really need to understand where the gaps are, where the women face issues, administrative procedures based, and that also has made a big impact. And block revenue officials as well as district revenue officials, because the deputy collector is in charge. We also took this as a strategy where we have quarterly training of paralegal workers. So, and that is held in Ahmedabad, which is like the central place, which is very close to the state capital, Gandhinagar. So what we do is, in our training programs, we invite somebody from the state capital to give us some knowledge, but the idea is not just the knowledge based. The idea is to build rapport with them so that they understand what we are trying to do, and that how, and the support. And we've got huge support, and the result is there are several workshops of other people also, but the result is, you can see number of government resolutions. We also conducted training of trainers for the Panchayat Raj training centers. The stamp duty government resolution, which we got changed. We got this training of village revenue officials inserted in their syllabus. So even if we don't conduct, we've conducted training of trainers, and we got it in the syllabus of their training. In general, in terms of achievements, yes, from a network of 13 organizations, it has reached to 39 plus. Half of them are community-based organizations, and we feel very proud of that. More than 8,000 or almost 9,000 women have got their rights. The numbers may seem to be a little less, but we've gone slow. uh, Women who come to the network are only those who are denied their rights by the family. So these are cases of struggle which last for about at least 8 months, 10 months, 11 months. We've been able to build a cadre of paralegal workers who are always going to be there in the villages for women to fall back on. And of course, a very good rapport with the government. As I said, there are many Swabhumi Kendras who are housed there, but there are many things which are beyond that. We work with several networks. We work with different INGOs, NGOs, even at the international level. We did a study 3 years back, and I just want to share that, and I'll close with this. The changes that women perceive, uh, half of them, more than half, feel secured, feel respected. So we talked about welfare argument. We also talked about gender justice and empowerment. Able to participate in decision making, few of them. No fear, but better relationship with family members. They feel better being the owner, feels proud of it, feels that they, because of land, they are better taken care of by relatives. There is also one thing which came up was negative relation with the relatives, because they had claimed their land rights, and that had resulted into a little bit of a difficult situation for them. I think with this, I would just say that land rights for women, land ownership for women is not just desirable, but if we work together, it's also possible. And we need to make a difference. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Shilpa. That was very, very informative and a lot to take in and process. I don't see any questions in the chat box, so I'm going to just let people unmute themselves and ask questions. And Shilpa, do you want to quit sharing, stop sharing the slides so that we can see each other? Okay, great. Thank you. I just have a real basic question here. When you talk about land ownership, does that include like, say, a woman's house? I'm wondering if you know, say when a woman's husband dies and it says, well, the land goes over to the son or whatever, not to the wife. Are we talking about also the land that their house is on? I mean, do they lose their, in what sense, lose their home, their house?
So, Karen, when the network focuses on agriculture land,
Just agriculture.
but the network.
Mhm,
So, as I said, the book was the trigger.
mhm,
We started the network. Then
mhm,
network became the trigger for a lot of NGOs which were members of the network to think on this direction which they had not thought of. So a lot of NGOs, so the network collectively works only on agriculture land for a very conscious reason that each type of land has its own laws. Every department is different, you know,
mhm,
and as a network, we have certain limited scope. Scope as in we can't sort of do everything. But the NGOs, a lot of NGOs started exactly what you said. They went into why only agriculture land? Why not homestead land? Why not housing land? Why not house per se? We have Kutch in which cattle is considered asset for women. So they went in for cattle. In tribal areas, they went in for trees because trees are assets.
mhm,
So to understand what women call as assets or property of their own. So from land, it sort of widened to property.
mhm,
And what is property for women? So to listen to them and taking up those issues, trees had never emerged in the picture, you know, until somebody came up and says that we are now going to work on trees. And we were like,
mhm.
how can you work on trees, you know? So, but it is true that in tribal culture, they even divide the trees when there is a division of property.
Okay.
So, yes and no to your question. As a network, we don't work on that. But as member of the network, a lot of organizations have certainly moved in that direction.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
And similar, if I could add, sorry,
Mhm,
just to sort of elaborate, that we started with agriculture land, but um, we gradually moved into forest land. Hmm?
mhm,
Because in tribal areas, forest land is a part and parcel of their culture.
mhm,
And that's where they cultivate as well. Plus, there is a Forest Rights Act which came in 2005. So that also gave rights to forest dwellers, and it has to be in joint name. So we took that up as well. We also took up gradually public land. So there are sort of offshoots which we went into as a collective, as a network also, which
mhm,
I've not talked about. I've just focused only on private agricultural land
mhm.
to make it a little
Okay.
more simple.
Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
That was very interesting. I loved listening to you speak. And I guess my question is for you personally, what is your long-term vision for the work that you're doing with the collective?
See, long-term visions are two, three. One, as I said in between, we want all the panchayats, the village councils, to take up the issue in a way that women don't have to struggle for this. It's a right. Hmm? There has to be some mechanism which ensures that, that they can claim the right. So it's only when the inheritance entry is done, somebody's parents die, and then the land is inherited by the children. That's where the daughters' names are signed off, are ticked off. Now that is being done by the village revenue official along with the family, but verified by the panchayat, the village council. Village council is completely local. Local as in the members are from the village itself. So they know whose daughter is married where and whose son is where and whatever, you know. So our focus is on panchayats. If they really sort of take charge, then such a situation will not arise where women have to struggle. That is one basic thing. Others, of course, we also want the government to set up certain, as I said, Swabhumi Kendras, some support mechanisms for women. If they have to claim their rights, they need to know where to go. Right now, NGOs, fine. I mean, our network has established X number of centers, etc., etc., fine. But it has to be in the system. And the system actually has a lot of centers for support to women, but none of these centers take up such issues. So we want the government to take it up. These are two visions which will lead to sustainability, basically.
Thank you.
I have a quick question for Shilpa. Shilpa, so it was so interesting to see a slide on the study that you shared as part of the last slide. I'm wondering if in your study you had a microscopic focus on women who are single or women who are widowed, and how did they see this as a form of empowerment?
Absolutely. So we did define empowerment, and that's where, in fact, decision making, self-esteem, those things came up. So certainly, because that is definitely our focus. So security is, we knew that this will come up, but our underlying assumption, or we wanted to actually, and that's where, in fact, Gokul, the process matters a lot. See, the paralegal workers filling up a form for somebody is not going to be an empowering process. It's empowering when you teach somebody how to do that, or where to go, etc. Now, not everybody can do that, and it's also a lot of struggle for a woman. She's just become widowed. It's a big social psychological trauma for her, and asking her to do certain things, it depends on the circumstances. But we've come across, Gokul, because we took an empowerment approach, we've come across several women who then, now, which I didn't mention, but we've taken up land legal literacy campaign at the village level now. So the basics of land records should be known by everybody. Now, how many villages the paralegal workers will reach? They can't reach everywhere, So because they are right now involved in cases of struggle, which are very complicated. So we've prepared these local women who have struggled for themselves. They are very enthusiastic. So we have trained them for basic literacy, and we have, of course, prepared a lot of good material which they can use. But so I'm just sort of sorry to sort of divert the response, but it starts with this empowerment. So there's a huge empowerment, not of everybody, and we don't expect from everybody because of the social circumstances or psychological circumstances that they come from. But more than one third, I would say, certainly we'll see a change in their respect, in the power, in the tone. A pride will be felt, and that's where
Thank
they
you.
take up land legal literacy.
Thank you. And I think it's also a snowball effect going from,
Absolutely.
one community to another to, one set of people to another. So thank you for that.
Very true.
Shilpa, we say, very nice to hear from you. I am able to resonate with you, the whole dream, no, the idea of empowering women to own their land. And actually, I come from a farmer's family, so I know the value of the land. And when you said the beginning, when the husband comes to the wife's side, where there is no male child in that family, so the lady is the owner of the land. So man plays a subordinate role, and he doesn't have a power. Take my family. My mother is the only child to her parents. So my father came to my mother's house. So the land was owned by my mother. So I could see my mother's boldness to speak anything because she owns the land. So that is true. And now in our area, in Nagapattinam, it is a delta area, whole Tanjore and the district, former district. Now there are 4 districts. And I could see a good number of, no, a considerable percentage of land belongs to the temples, temple lands, 500,000 acres to each temple. But those lands are owned by or taken on lease by the so-called high caste. So the problem is the scheduled castes and the scheduled castes are not having any say in the temple land. So last 5 years or 7 years, we have been motivating our widows to ask the government to give government land for agricultural purposes. So this is a movement is going everywhere now. Kalangarai is also coordinating its network among the NGOs working for the widows and single women. So we want the government to come in, get into that, and give lands to the widows on lease for 3 years or 4 years, so that they own the land for a few years, instead of the so-called high-cost people owning. It is the landless agricultural peasants belonging to the so-called scheduled castes. So I think it's you have enlightened me to start a paralegal workers to among the women, so that they train their women to inherit land.
Thank you, Father, for raising this very, very important
Yes.
dimension of land.
Uh,
Now, land lease is something which I think we touched upon that, Karen, and we were discussing informally. So I'm a little unaware of the temple issues. I've heard it in other states. I would suggest that you should perhaps read the Bodh Gaya movement. Bodh Gaya movement
okay.
was completely based out of Mutt. Mutt is the mandir, the temple.
Mandir,
And
yes,
Mutt,
yeah.
so
But,
Mutt land was being distributed, and that's where, in fact, women's voice came the first time. So in the history of women's land rights in land right movement in India, Bodh Gaya movement is a very, very significant one. But having
okay.
said that, the rest of it I would like to comment on, not the temple part, but I suppose you're suggesting the government to give land on lease to the scheduled caste people, specifically women,
No,
right?
widows, not
Sorry. Yeah. So
widows.
we've done that. So I was just sharing our experience that, ultimately when we, I don't know how much time we have, but this is a very important point that you raised. I'll just take 2 minutes for this. So, Father, when we say agriculture land ownership, we are outrightly not talking about, or we are outrightly talking only about landed families. I'm talking about us, Gujarat.
Yeah.
So we are not touching landless families.
Yes.
So, and that was a question which came up in the network again and again, that landed people already have a resource. Even if woman doesn't have it in her name, the family has it, they have something to fall back on. Whereas
Yes.
landless people don't have anything. So what do we want to do with the landless women
That's
families or
people. Yes.
and that's where land lease came in the picture. So as I said, there have been several offshoots after this network started, and
Very
one of
good.
them was definitely land lease. So two things I would like to share. So we went to the government for the same reason, that give land to the women's collectives.
Women's collectives.
And
Yes.
and our experience with women's collectives, so 2 or 3 of the women's collectives already had taken land on long-term lease, so 15 years or 20 years. And we realized, and there were 2 or 3 which also had short-term lease of 3 years or 1 year. We realized that, one, it should not be short-term land. Sorry, Karen, am I
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
go ahead.
so it should not be short-term, but it should always be long-term lease for women's collectives, because the quality of land that the government is going to allot is very poor, is going to be very poor. They're going to allot wasteland.
Wasteland. Yes.
The quality is going to be very poor. Women are going to be putting hard labor to improve that quality. And that takes time. That takes at least 3-4 years for the quality of soil to get improved. Once the quality of soil improves, by that time the the short-term lease sort of expires.
Expires.
Number two, what has happened is, after that short-term lease expires, the government has not renewed, because in Gujarat, there's a huge wave of industrialization. So there are SIRs coming up, there are SEZs coming up, different things are coming up, special investment zones, special whatever, different things.
Yeah.
And now they don't want to give it to any rural community. So they want to
Okay.
just keep it reserved for, so they, some or the other pretext, they keep on denying the renewal of the land lease.
Land. Yes.
Third thing is we've also then tried the private land, which has been lying fallow. Now, those people are not ready to give for a long-term lease because they are afraid that the land will be gone. Now
Yes.
that again, so again, women put in their hard labor. Suddenly the owner comes and sees that the quality of land has improved a lot. So he takes it back, from
Yes,
them.
yes.
So women are at a loss effectively. That is what we've seen, unless it's a long-term lease. That is one thing that our major learning. And
Yes.
second major learning has been the management part. It's good to take land collectively on lease, but managing collectively is very difficult.
Difficult. Yes, yes.
So then there have been ways, and there has been a study again in Telangana versus Kerala, where women's collectives had leased in land. Kudumshri has done, and Telangana also has, government has enabled land to the women's collectives, and there have been studies. So you could refer to that maybe if you want to. But
Okay.
sorry. But that's something which one definitely we need to look at.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you again. Since we started it a little late, I just decided that we should go ahead and give you more time for answering questions. And so I appreciate that you've stayed on and others have stayed on to hear that information. I just want to remind you that we have a survey that's going to go out after the webinar. And also, if you're viewing this recording on your own and not participating in person in the webinar, that we will send you a survey to complete after you watch the recording or the webinar today. The survey has been designed by our social work intern, Taylor, and for a project that she's doing for a course on program evaluation. So we'd appreciate if you could complete the survey. It takes literally a minute to complete. And then finally, I want to remind you of our next webinar in February. Gokul, do you want to go ahead and say a few words about the speaker and
Sure.
the
Thank you,
title of
Dr. Kaiser. So the speaker for our next webinar is Ms. Shamila Shivakumaran. She is a doctoral student in the PhD program in social work at the University of Texas, Arlington. And she comes to us with a lot of work experience working with Tamil women in Sri Lanka who typically work in as labor on tea estates and in other low-paying jobs. And her work around community development is really looking at the idea of a self-help group model for really understanding and enhancing resiliency among women, particularly given the context that Sri Lanka has had a long time history of war between Tamils and the dominant group of the Sinhala speaking people. So it's going to be a very interesting webinar again. Thank you.
Thank you, Gokul. And again, thank you, Ms. Shilpa Vasavada, for this, very stimulating and enlightening webinar today. And thank you for those people who have participated, and I hope that you can join us again in February.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Okay.